right, good afternoon, everybody. I pray that it has been an amazing weekend. That's my prayer. Good afternoon again, if the live just officially started. Hope everyone has been having a wonderful weekend. Today is the 21st of September, and it is a wonderful Sunday, restful Sunday. My husband and I had a amazing time being a part of my parents' 40th class reunion the night before class of 1985. They did that first off, and it was just real cool to see what you can look forward to, Lord willing, as far as classmates from years past staying in contact, celebrating together, seasons of mourning together, remaining connected, remembering the beautiful times, thanking God for the trials and the triumphs of just the season, right? But shout out to everybody who holds fast to what helped shape who you are, especially during like your, I won't say secondary years, but like the primary years of life, with school, from elementary to middle school to high school. But it was real cool to see the vision come to life. Like you hear about it, but I think that it was real cool to be able to witness it in action, and seeing their friends and seeing cousins, like a mini family reunion for me as well. Catching up with folks and reconnecting with folks, and now having plans, making plans to stay in contact, right? Especially with my family and I no longer being further away than the Tampa Lakeland area. But it's been a beautiful season nonetheless. But again, today is Sunday, another beautiful day that the Lord has given us, and we are going to continue to just hear, learn. I pray that y'all share it with whomever you desire. Chew on the Word of God. For folks who are joining me for the first time, I read through the Old Testament over the course of a couple years, bite-sized chapters at a time, 5 chapters here, 10 chapters there, on select days throughout the week. I tended to focus on the weekends being the time I would do it because I knew that it was a lot less that I needed to do during certain seasons of weekends. And it also allowed for me to have good energy and focus to just spend time with God, sitting in silence, reading His Word, praying, listening, doing nothing, meditating on what I'm learning, paying attention to the world around me, thanking God for just the small things, right? Your little blessings. The Lord has allowed Frank and I to bring 3 little humans into this world, right? Watching them grow up, learning ways to teach them as well as show them, more than we teach them with our words, but through our actions, right? It's all just a beautiful journey in this thing called life. Dedicating just everything that I know I have to give out of gratitude to the Most High through what I call the faith walk, right? Walking by faith, not by sight, as often as necessary, holding fast to His Word, thanking Him for the Holy Spirit that leads and guides us into all truth, acknowledging my shortcomings and not allowing those thoughts to debilitate me, but to thank God for what's already been done on Calvary and to walk in newness, repent, change mind, walk in newness of life. Thank God for reconciliation and not condemnation, when it comes to just being in good standing with Him, simply because He loved us way before we first loved Him or thought about Him. And He thought to die for all of our sins on Calvary and raise in 3 days, defeating the sting of death. All praise to Jesus Christ. But anywho, before I go into like tangent world, what we came for. But yeah, reading through the Old Testament, prayed about it, was going to keep going reading through the Bible. And I said, you know what, about to capture it somewhere, where I can always look back at it. I can share it out. I can be in real time with a few folks, to read through, ask questions, provide clarification if there is anything stated that was shared in error. Iron sharpening iron, right? Correcting in love, calling folks in love. That's what it's all about. But we're gonna jump right in. So when I read second chapter of Samuel, uh, the book of Samuel, chapter 16, 18 through 14, the first word that came to my mind was wow. Um, the trust in God and the restraint that King David showed through those verses that I read in a minute, it was just a wow moment for me. But I wrote that David has so much power, right? But he does not silence Shemai. He keeps his mind on God's will and just keeps walking. So for folks who saw me a couple weekends ago, we were to the part where one of King David's son, Absalom, decided that he didn't want to be patient and see if he would be blessed with the honor to become the next king. He decided, my dad is getting up in age. Let me go ahead and assert myself. He started intercepting people that would come into town to speak with the king and giving advice instead of allowing them to go to his dad. Um, Essentially building an alliance and trust. And after so many seasons of time of him doing that, standing at the gate instead of being where he needed to be in his own house, handling his own business, he began to gain the heart of the people, right? Because they're seeing him so much, they're relying on him to essentially operate as king. And then he decides, shoot, just gonna take it, right? Word gets back to King David. King David is up in the age at this point, but the reality of it is, it be your own people sometimes. King David and the people who love and protect him understands that a lot of people are for King Absalom. They've already decided that King David is a has-been, and since he's still breathing and alive, what are they thinking? They are thinking King Absalom, who is not the true king, is going to take David's life, snuff him out. And if it's not Absalom, which we know it's not Absalom, it's always the people riding for Absalom. It's the people who are on Absalom's side that's going to take David's life. So David and the people who are still loyal to him, they get up and they flee the kingdom. And they are legit running and hiding out in the wilderness, places where King Absalom's man would not think to find, right? They don't know. And for those who know the history of King David, before he became King David, we know David knows how to hide. And we know that God is clearly on David's side. But he is good at getting away and staying out of harm's way thanks to the protection of the Most High God and his wisdom and obedience in knowing his land, building alliances and network. So King David is going about his business, and then there's this guy named Shemai along the way, which is why I had the wow moment when I read 2 Samuel chapter 16. But what I'm going to do is read verses 8 through 14 to kind of tie it all together. So King David, he's run away because his life is hanging in the line because his son Absalom wants to be legit king, and David is still alive and well, which means he got to go some way somehow. So here we are in verses 8 through 14 of chapter 16. The Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul. Now this is Shemai talking recklessly to King David. He's upset and he curses David. So he's just saying a whole bunch of stuff he ain't got no business saying. But if you read from verses 5 up to 7, you'll see like where he intercepts King David and his crew as they're walking, like they're just continuing to move to stay out of harm's way. So this is Shemai talking bad on David. Verse 8, the Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned, and the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom, your son. So now you are caught in your own evil, because you are a bloodthirsty man. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Please, let me go over and take off his head. So first off, no respect for Shemai to call him what he called him. And he's like, let me just end it already. You just going to keep letting him talk this talk? Verse 10, but the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? Verse 11, and David said to Abishai and all his servants, see how my son, who came from my own body, seeks my life? How much more now may this Benjamite, talking about Shammai, let him alone, and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him. Verse 12, it may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day. Verse 13, and as David and his men went along the road, Shammai went along the hillside opposite him, and cursed as he went, threw stones at him, and kicked up dust. 14, now the king and all the people who were with him became weary, so they refreshed themselves there. So I say a while because of David's faith. He understands that it is not about a flesh situation. If Shammai is emboldened to say what he's saying, David ain't even mad at Shammai, seemingly so, right? He's saying, hey, if the Lord told him to do it, let him do it. Who am I, right? If that's what the will is of the God, our God, okay. But that was a wild moment, how he still kept his eyes focused on God, did not give power and frustration and energy to the person that was talking bad on him, did not get in an argument, did not send somebody over to silence him. And for folks who are hearing me, there's so many lessons to be learned in that, right? Understanding to keep your eyes focused on the Most High God, your help coming from the Lord, right? Not engaging in the ignorance, because after a while, if people around are trying to figure out what's going on, there's a proverb that says you can't distinguish who's the fool, right? A recent conversation I had with my children about arguments and going back and forth and trying to prove who right versus who wrong, and who telling the truth versus who's lying. But all of those things came up to my memory when I read that. But definitely a wild moment of how David, again, stayed steadfast on, if this is God's will, so be it. I'm just going to keep walking, right? And whatever is his will, even though I may not like what I'm hearing and what's happening, the throwing of the stones for me, right? The kicking up the dust for me, may God still be glorified, again, God's will, God's way. So powerful, wild moment there. Jumping to verses 15 through 23. Another mouth drop moment for me. New characters on the scene, but Hushai does what King David tells him. But who and where did Ahithophel come from? That was my initial question in reading verses 15 through 23. And then even though it was a mouth drop moment, God did curse David. Like, this is us putting pieces together from prior situations. And this was a part of the thing that was to come being fulfilled, because of the sin that David had caused with Bathsheba against Uriah. So what I wrote is, it is messy, it's uncouth, but if you circle back to 1 Samuel chapter 12, verses 7 through 15, you'll see the fulfillment of what's happening in 2 Samuel, verses 15 through 23. But long story short, Ahithophel is a confidant of Absalom, who said he's going to be king. There's always kind of like the right-hand man, or the person that's the wise one that, tends to be a high priest, right? And they seek God and they provide guidance based on their wisdom to the king. The king relies heavily on these people. But Absalom has a guy named Ahithophel. And in 2 Samuel 15:12, David does not care for him. We learn that he loved his son Absalom, but he does not care for Ahithophel, which is like his right-hand man. Whenever things are going on, the king is like, hey, you, whatever the name of the person is, you prayed about it, you sought about it. What does the Lord say? Or what are your thoughts, right? Which way should I go in tough decisions? But Ahithophel was a person that King David didn't care for, who was his son's, King Absalom, right-hand man. And that's why David has Hushai, his right-hand man, stay behind to gain Absalom's trust over Ahithophel. So you'll see an interesting story take place through as you continue to read through chapter 16 through like 18. But here we are with verses 15 through 23, still in chapter 16 of 2 Samuel. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. So it was when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom that Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king, long live the king." So Hushai's putting on, because initially Hushai fled with King David and all of his people after news got out that Absalom is king, and everybody that's not on Absalom's side is about to get cut down, so that they could reign. But David told Hushai, "Hey man, I don't want you to come with me. This is what I want you to do. I want you to gain the trust of Absalom, my son, right? Because I don't like Ahithophel being in his ear, right? He's seen you with me, right? So go back and prove to him that you're loyal." And of course, Absalom questions this, but it ends up working out for the good long term. So Hushai is saying, "Long live the king," to King Absalom in verse 16. Verse 17, so Absalom said to Hushai, "Is this your loyalty to your friend?" He like, "I thought you was real friends with my dad, David. Like, this is how you show loyalty? Why did you not go with your friend?" So King Absalom is clearly not dumb, right? He's questioning, why is Hushai really here? Verse 18, and Hushai said to Absalom, "No, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be, and with him I will remain." 19, furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in your father's presence, so I will be in your presence. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give advice as to what we should do." And Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Go into your father's concubines, whom he has loved to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you are abhorred by your father. Then the hands of all who are with you will be strong." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on top of the house, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. So they're also delineating. We're trusting him because he's supposed to be seeking God's guidance and counsel on how things should be handled to anticipate what's to come. So there's that. Hushai is now working to earn Absalom's trust, but Absalom is 10 toes down with Ahithophel. So that's that in 2 Samuel 16. Going into now 2 Samuel 17. The Lord is with David. That's what the first thing I said when I read verse 14. Verses 1 through 14 in particular are really good. But Hushai's advice is chosen over Ahithophel's, which was David's hope all along. So things are continuing to happen. Absalom is trying to assert himself as king. Over time, he eventually asked not just Ahithophel's advice, but Hushai's advice. And that's when like the tides turn, because it works out in the favor of David. Now, this whole time where Absalom is trying to assert kingship, David is fleeing. He's moving here from there from here. And he has like his little birdies, right? People who are unassuming, going back and forth to give like what's the news, what's to come to him, so that he can know if he needs to stay where he is or if somebody's noticed where he is, then he needs to keep it pushing. So that's that. But the Lord is with David according to 2 Samuel 17, 1 through 4. And it reads, "Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, Now let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he is weary and weak, and make him afraid, and all the people who are with him will flee, and I will strike only the king. Then I will bring back all the people to you. When all return except the man whom you seek, all the people will be at peace." And the same blessed Absalom and all the elders of Israel. So Absalom says that, and then the advice of Hushai comes through in verses 5 through 14 of 2 Samuel chapter 17. So what I'll do for the second time, I'll probably read a little faster than usual, and then I'll share like what I wrote down. So I'm going to keep going. Right now I'm in 2 Samuel chapter 17, and then I just wrapped up verse 1 through 4. But what I'm going to do is do a jump to 2 Samuel chapter 17, verses 14, and it reads, So Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel. For the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom, which is my response of like, the Lord is good to David. So verses 5 through 13 is Hushai providing his advice, and Ahithophel feeling some type of way because up until this point, before Hushai returned, Ahithophel was in Absalom's ear. He was the trusted person to provide direction. And if Absalom would have listened to Ahithophel, it would have been different. But again, the Lord allowed for what needed to be fulfilled regarding David fleeing his kingdom. As he told his prophet Nathan to King David, hey, it's gonna be one of your sons based on what you did with Bathsheba, Uriah's wife, right? But the Lord is gracious and we moving on. But anticipate, like he said, like here's to come based on what you've done. So not only did their first son die, but that was the fulfillment. So David is running for his life with his people who are loyal to him, and then Hushai gets in the mix and shifts things to where God is essentially, it's like you're back in good standing. He's just continuing to show love to David despite the hardship and how David is handling said hardship. Now, 15 through 29, those verses of chapter 17, you have Hushai, Jonathan, and Ahimaaz remaining loyal to David, and they get word to him about what Absalom plans to do because Hushai gave the advice, right? So now, again, you got the birdies, the right people trying to run and get news back and forth so he can anticipate. But long story short, Absalom found out and went after Jonathan and Ahimaaz, but there was a woman who had been coming in and out, little birdie, to get David reports creatively. But the woman hid Jonathan and Ahimaaz in like a well and covered it to where it didn't look like the well was of use. It was just old and overgrown with like trees and brush and, the things that grow when you don't allow for water to be drawn pretty quickly. But she creatively hid them in the well. The folks who was chasing after Jonathan and Ahimaaz, when they got word, they couldn't find them. They're not found. And then Ahithophel ultimately takes his own life because of his frustration and how the tides turn. What Ahithophel did, though, prior to taking his own life was getting his home affairs in order because he had a whole family, y'all. He knew what he was going to do and he knew why he took his life. But before he did it, in verse 23, I'll read like what he did. And it just had me thinking, I almost feel like laws and things have changed over time when it comes to dying by suicide or committing suicide, whatever language you want to use, because these are the things that people did when they felt like their back was against the wall, but they still had enough sense to care about the people that they would leave behind. They would get it all in order, and then insurance policy or whatever that was existing in their absence would then be provided to their people in their absence. Modern day, depending on states and laws, there are places that says if that is the way that you go out, folks are not entitled to whatever insurance coverage and policy. It has language that says if you go out this way, right, you're exempt from. Sad truth, but a truth nonetheless, right? Because again, some people felt like that was the solution. If they felt that things were easier without them and their family would be taken care of, they would take their own life. Side comment, because I can't help myself. I watched a show that I really like. I think it's on HBO Max, but it's called Gilded Age. And it's really good for folks who haven't taken the time to kind of see how did the economy become established post the Depression and like the late 1800s. What was the plight of women? What were the plight of black men? What was the plight of black women? What was the plight of folks seen as immigrants, right? Foreign to the land, coming in and establishing themselves. But there is a very sad scene where this happens. What I said, Ahithophel did to himself after learning. Absalom didn't take my advice. David is about to come back and wreak havoc. I know I'm on the wrong side of that history. He commits suicide. Same situation, similar situation happens in the show called Gilded Age, where there's a man who's prominent, but he bets more than he should on the success of the railroad, right? Or trying to stop the success of the railroad, rather. And then there's other people who circumvents what he tries to do with a few other men who are normally not named, right? But it's always some backroom decision to do insider trading, which is why you have laws in place, right? To stop that. But when he realizes that he is going to lose out on society, is going to have a grave impact, he's losing everything, and he's going to be a nobody, he takes it upon himself to make sure his affairs are in order before he takes his life. So same situation again with Ahithophel. That's what he does. And again, verse 17:23, it reads, "Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled on a donkey and arose and went home to his house, to his city. Then he put his household in order and hanged himself and died. And he was buried in his father's tomb." Sad reality, but again, reality nonetheless, of him feeling like, what else I'm going to do? Everything I was trying to do to allow for Absalom to remain in power, it just fell to naught. So that's that. With 17 verses 15 to 29 is like the details behind it. And then I kind of stated how they were able to sneakily get the news to David in time, so that when the plan that Absalom entrusted Hushai's advice to go well did not go well, right? Because now David and his friends, his people, they know what's to come. There's this oh my goodness moment. So now we are in 2 Samuel 17, and I wrote next to my notes in verse 28-29, David is loved and protected as he and the many people run from Absalom. So verse 28 and 29, you have the people stepping up to take care of David. But he is a king who no longer has a home, right? But he has people who loves him. So you see situations, right, with him constantly running and fleeing and moving. There are Gileadites and folks from all over that are bringing beds and basins, earthen vessels with wheat, barley, flour, parched grain, beans, lentils, parched seeds. So he ain't worried about eating, right? Honey, curd, sheep, cheese of the herd, for David and the people who were with him to eat. For they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. So they knew where to go to them and provide them aid to make it a little bit easier on being outside of your nice little mansion, for lack of better words, right? Your empire, your kingdom, not taking your baths, not being fanned by your servants, right? Not eating the best of the best, to I'm out here for real in these woods. But the people came through, and again, that had a lot to do with David's reputation and the love of God providing from him, and him not even worrying or feeling some type of way about going from living on top of the world to, again, being in a place of a vagabond. Like, I don't have a home until this season. Right now, my safety, my life is more important. So I'm just going to keep moving and hiding in the brush and sleeping in the thickets, right? And trying to see if it's safe to sneak in the back way to stay in this home, right? If I need shelter, until the worst of the worst passes. Now, going to chapter 18 of 2 Samuel, verse 5, everyone heard David say, "Deal gently with Absalom." I'm going to read that because for those who know the story of Absalom, y'all know what happens to Absalom, which is unfortunate. But David, despite everything his son Absalom puts him through, loudly declares that no hurt, harm, or danger happens to Absalom. Don't hurt my son, right? So verse 5 of chapter 18 reads, "Now the king had commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai," because those his hitters, those his warriors, right, who are leading the armies. As David's getting older, he's not out there like that. But he says, "Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom." And all the people heard when the king gave all the captains orders concerning Absalom. So the people went out into the field to battle against Israel. Everybody else that jumped on Absalom's side, they were not so fortunate. But he said, "Deal gently with my son. You're not going to you're not going to take his life, right? We're going to handle it a different way. So to make sure the people who are problematic get cut down and are no longer an issue in case they decide to try it again, David says, get the rest of them, right? Ain't no mercy on them, but deal gently with my son. Now we go to verses 9 through 18 because unfortunately, Joab and them heard what they were told to do, but they disobeyed King David because they're feeling some type of way about everything they had to go through to protect their king, their families, and the other people who remained loyal to David when they were out in the wilderness fleeing for their life because Absalom wanted to be king. So what I'm going to do is read verses 9 through 18 of 2 Samuel chapter 18. And it reads, verse 9. Then Absalom met the servants of David. Absalom rode on a mule. So the battle happened. Folks got scattered. Folks got killed and cut down. They see Absalom, right? We're going to take you in. Then Absalom met the servants of David. Absalom rode on a mule. The mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree or boughs, and his head caught in the terebinth. So he was left hanging between heaven and earth, and the mule which was under him went on. I've heard a lot of people talk about Absalom must have had a whole bunch of dreadlocks on that head to get caught in the thickets of the boughs of the tree. Neither here nor there, his beautiful thick head of hair, his head got caught. So he's left hanging because the mule continues, right? So wherever they were, there was not a clear-cut path clearly. So the mule which was under him went on. Verse 10. Now a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, I just saw Absalom hanging in a terebinth tree. So Joab said to the man who told him, you just saw him? And why did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a belt. So clearly more wealth being generated. But the man said to Joab, though I were to receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, beware lest anyone touch the young man Absalom. So he's saying, Joab, you crazy? You talking about 10, I'm not taking 1,000 because I heard what King David said. I know King David's reputation. I'm not about to be that person. Otherwise, I would have dealt falsely against my own life, for there is nothing hidden from the king, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. That's verse 13. Verse 14, then Joab said, I cannot linger with you. And he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart, while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree. And 10 young men who bore Joab's armor surrounded Absalom and struck and killed him. So Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing Israel, for Joab held back the people. And they took Absalom and cast him into a large pit in the woods, and laid a very large heap of stones over him. Then all Israel fled, everyone to his tent. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken up and set up a pillar for himself, which is in the king's valley. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. He called the pillar after his own name, and to this day it is called Absalom's monument. History. So Joab, one of King David's captains, did not respect what King David said and had 10 folks with him. It's always people you spend a lot of time with, willing to take that risk, which they did. So they didn't listen, y'all. They didn't listen. Now we get to 2 Samuel verse 33, because when David gets wind, y'all, he goes and he's saddened, deeply saddened. He's so hurt to hear somebody kill his son. And these are the people that's in his corner, right? In his face, not saying what they've done. But, later, all things come to the light. That's what I'll say. But David is deeply hurt at the news that Absalom was killed. Well, he was murdered. So 2 Samuel 18 verse 33 reads. I gotta turn the page, friends. And the king said to the Cushite, because there was a Cushite who got wind, and they stumbled upon, is the young man Absalom safe? So the Cushite answered, may the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise against you to do harm be like that young man. So his long appropriate way for that time of saying, nah, he ain't safe. I hope everybody ends up like him. David goes into a deep, dark mourning. Then the king was deeply moved, verse 33, and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he wept, he said thus, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died in your place, O Absalom, my son." He is grieving. And where he's grieving is causing the people that's loyal to him to feel some type of way. So throughout verse 19 onward, they're trying to give him time to grieve, right? Things are happening. He's still responsible for running the kingdom. But eventually, I think it's Joab. They was like, Joab is like, hey y'all, King David is he's mourning and he's gonna mess up this victory that we got. Like we got to get him together because it's going to cause confusion to the people, right? They're like, hold on, should we be sad that they did what they did to us? Should we be happy? Like, I'm confused. Clearly, David loves his son, even though his son did a terrible deed, right? And while people who don't have that relationship are not fully understanding, right? He's where he is for a reason. But it does take one of his men to tell him, you got to get yourself together because you cause a lot of confusion. People don't know, like, if they should be mourning with you, because some people are sad with him, others are excited. I'm sure many people have experienced just kind of mixed messages of, I don't know what we should be right now when you have leaders that are excited about something but also sad about something, or just a mix of different emotions, right? So that's where David is, man. He is going through it hard after getting the news. And then 2 Samuel 19 is confirmation that trust and respect is established throughout the people for King David. Joab ended up checking King David due to the confusion of him grieving Absalom's death, when Absalom and his people were declared enemies because of their disloyal actions, right? And their plans to harm David and all who stayed loyal to him. But 2 Samuel 19 is confirmation that they love David. They are with David, and they don't feel no type of way with how he's managing through things. Being a human being, right? But also being a person to not play with, because we know David's reputation, which I thought was dope. But 2 Samuel 19, I'm going to read verse 12 and 13, because this is when bone and flesh is mentioned as a sign of oneness, which we've seen a couple times in scriptures, early as Adam waking up from that slumber and seeing Eve and saying, whoo, you are my bone of bone, you are my flesh of flesh, right? We won. But in unity, togetherness is the confirmation. So Joab is concerned. However, this is confirmation that he didn't need to worry about that. Yeah, that wasn't confusion. If there was confusion, it was people whose hearts were not right. Joab and a few of his friends, right? Based on what they actually did to Absalom. So in 2 Samuel chapter 19, verse 12 and 13 reads, verse 12, you are my brethren, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? God, do so to me and more also, if you are not commander of the army before me continually in place of Joab. So this is David returning to Jerusalem. All the people are back to arguing. Tribes, the cousins, the brothers, and them, they just can't get together, right? They can't stay together. So there's a dispute going on. They're like, the king saved us from the hand of our enemies, and he delivered us from the Philistines, and he fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, he was anointed over us. He died in battle. Why do you say nothing about bringing back the king? Right. And then, King David is dealing with the elders and working through all of these frustrations, because they're like, man, you gotta do right. Even though he acted up, get his body from under the pile, bring him right back, let him get his rightful burial. And then, long story short, King David is they like, bring him back to the kingdom. We want, presence. So long story short, that's what's happening in 9 through 11. And then he says what he says in verse 14. So he swayed the hearts of all the men of Judah, just as the heart of one man, so that they sent this word to the king, return you and all your servants. It's safe, David. You can come back. Then the king returned and came to the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to go meet the king, to escort the king across the Jordan. And Shammai, son of Gera, a Benjamite, who was from Bahrain, heard and came down with the man of Judah to meet King David. Y'all remember the name Shimei. He was the one that was on one. So he's coming because he like, I got to make peace because my head is on the chopping block next, right? When King David get over grieving and everything, I'm about to be in some trouble. But long story short, David has mercy on Shimei. And people don't like that. They say, hey, you should have went ahead and, killed him as well. But people do not like that. But verses 40 through 43 of chapter 19 support scripture that says, brothers are meant for quarrel, and they are always arguing about something, which sometimes leads to more battles and more wars. So that's what we see in verses 40 and 43 of chapter 19. So more drama, y'all, verses 40 through 43. And if you've never read 2 Samuel chapter 19, it's long, right? It's 43 verses, but it's really good to read. But long story short, you read about just more or less the same arguments, disputes, cannot get on one accord. They feel in some type of way, and then they battle it out. We go on to war based on just not agreeing how things should be handled. So with the quarrel, it was about who deserved more based on how King David was taken care of. So there's always motive, right? During the time he was fleeing and looking for protection and a safe place to hide, there were people that were taken advantage of. I want to be remembered in a good light, right? Not necessarily because I'm doing it because of the sake of it's the right thing to do, right? I'm not going to let my left hand know my right hand is doing it, vice versa. But I'll read it so y'all can see how sometimes like the pettiness turns into things bigger than what it needs to be, which again becomes battles and wars. Verse 40, now the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went on with him. And all the people of Judah escorted the king, and also half the people of Israel. Just then, all the men of Israel came to the king and said to the king, why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king, his household, and all David's men with him across the Jordan? So all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel. Y'all paying attention? Judah versus Israel, when they are clearly one. They're all related. And they're all related. Ain't no other way around it. So now they feel some type of way. Why have our brethren, the man of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king, his household, and all David's men with him across the Jordan? 42. So all the men of Judah answered the man of Israel, because the king is a close relative of ours. Why then are you angry over this matter? Have we ever eaten at the king's expense, or has he given us any gift? And the man of Israel answered the man of Judah and said, we have 10 shares in the king. Therefore, we also have more right to David than you. Why then do you despise us? Were we not the first to advise bringing back our king? Yet the words of the man of Judah were fiercer than the words of the man of Israel. So this whole back and forth, y'all know the tribe of Judah is the greater tribe, the larger tribe. Then you got the other tribes. Y'all remember Dan, Asher, Naphtali, Benjamin, Gideon. It's 12 of them. Jacob had 12 sons. Their sons had a whole bunch of children. Right? They grew up, they grew out, they established their own nation, not nations, but their own tribes, but they are one. But they still don't seem to like or trust each other. It's always us versus them and different feelings about all the things. But as we keep reading, we'll see wars and battles are breaking out because of disputes like that. But I'm going to end with chapter 20, which is the power of a woman's words. There's a woman that we're going to read about who saves her city and its people. But 2 Samuel chapter 20 is amazing. But what I'm going to do is read verses 14 through 22, because I know we've gone over longer than usual. And then we're going to call it a day until next time. So 2 Samuel 20 verses 14 through 22. And it reads, and he went through all the tribes of Israel to Abel and Beth-maachah and all the Berites. So they were gathered together and also went after Sheba. Then they came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-maachah, And they cast up a siege mound against the city, and it stood by the rampart. And all the people who were with Joab battered the wall to throw it down. They fighting, y'all. They back in war. Then a wise woman cried out from the city, "Hear, hear. Please say to Joab, 'Come nearby, that I may speak with you.' When he came near to her, the woman said, 'Are you Joab?' He answered, 'I am.' Then she said to him, 'Hear the words of your maidservant.' And he answered, 'I'm listening.' So she spoke, saying, 'They used to talk in former times, saying, They shall surely seek guidance at Abel, and so they would end disputes. I am among the peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city and a mother in Israel. Why would you swallow up the inheritance of the Lord?' And Joab answered and said, far be it from me that I shall swallow up or destroy. That is not so. But a man from the mountains of Ephraim, Sheba, the son of Bichri by name, has raised his hand against the king, against David. Deliver him only, and I will depart from the city." So the woman said to Joab, "Watch, his head will be thrown to you over the wall." Whoop! Then the woman in her wisdom went to all the people, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. Then he blew a trumpet, and they withdrew from the city, every man to his tent. So Joab returned to the king at Jerusalem. Long story short, war drama breaking out, and Joab and his crew is about to decimate a city. It takes a bold woman shouting out, "Hey, it's a whole bunch of women and children and families. You are literally about to destroy people who have nothing to do with whatever the issue is. Can we keep the peace?" And then she brokers, hey, one person is who they're looking for so that justice can be had. Because if you read through and through, you'll see why. So is it going to be all of us, or is it going to be one person? And you already know what they did. Sorry, man. You got to go. You got to go. But that's it for the day. It is probably about 2 or 3 more times when we get, I ain't going to say 2 or 3 more times. It's probably 1 more time. Because I'm trying to think. I think 2 Samuel is 25, 26 chapters. Let me check to see. 24. So this time, Lord willing, on the next weekend, we'll be going into 1 Kings. But appreciate y'all continue to listen and read along. Drop the comments, drop the questions, drop the corrections. Continue to make it a wonderful day. And again, as the Lord wills, I'll see y'all again. It's softball, baseball season, so it may not be regular time, but we're going to try to keep with not missing a weekend if we don't have to. Take care, everybody. Bye.